A continuación, invitamos al doctor Barry Castleman, ingeniero químico de la Universidad Johns Hopkins, magíster en Ingeniería Ambiental y doctor de la Escuela de Higiene y Salud Pública de la misma institución. El doctor Castleman ha sido consultor del gobierno estadounidense, de la Organización Internacional del Trabajo, del Departamento de Justicia de los Estados Unidos, de la organización Greenpeace, de la Comisión Europea, del Banco Mundial, de la Organización Mundial de la Salud y de la Organización Panamericana de la Salud, entre otras agencias e instituciones de renombre internacional. El doctor Castleman tiene entonces un mensaje para todos nosotros.
Thank you very much. It's very hard following Fernanda. Okay, I'm going to talk about criminality and the asbestos industry. This is an industry that has been criminally prosecuted in Italy. I'm going to talk about the case of Stefan Schmidt-Heine and some of the things that you ought to consider when it comes to the nature of the asbestos industry. The World Health Organization estimates that over 100,000 people die every year because of asbestos use. There is no safe level of exposure to asbestos. The international authorities have all agreed on that. And yet you have companies like the asbestos industry advertising in El Tiempo on March 24. This is actually not listed as an advertisement. This is in the newspaper as if it was a news story. And it's simply a series of question points that the asbestos industry spokesman is making. And the main point he says is that el tipo de asbesto usado en Colombia está normado y es seguro. It's safe, seguro. So the question I would have for this man is, what if you're wrong? What if all the international authorities are right about asbestos being so deadly? Are you going to be criminally responsible for the deaths that occur here in Colombia someday? Fernanda showed you a picture of this. This is the global usage of asbestos, and you can see that after around the end of the 1990s, the use of asbestos continued at about 2 million tons a year. It's not going down. It's continuing to stay at the same level. Some countries are even using more asbestos than they used to use. Next, please. This is the problem. Here's a man who is taking an electrically powered saw, cutting a sheet of asbestos cement roofing. You can see children standing around. This is right in the middle of a street in India. No protection of the worker. Unfortunately, the picture is cut off. If you could see the worker's hair in the full photo, you see his hair is white from the asbestos. Next, please. All these asbestos factories generate a lot of wastes. There are broken pieces of asbestos cement sheets and pipes, and these materials are waste. They can't be sold or used. And so the asbestos factories typically have a lot of asbestos wastes dumped all around them. And this creates a hazard for all of the people in the community around the factory. In the town of Casale Monferrato, of 35,000 people in Italy, where they had a big asbestos factory that Mr. Schmidt-Heine's Eternit company operated for 80 years. They have one death every week from mesothelioma. Next. This is the kind of advertising that the asbestos industry puts out. This was in the Times of India 10 years ago. You can see the headline. It says the asbestos cement products are absolutely safe and this is not listed as an advertisement, but in fact, the asbestos interests have some financial interest in the Times of India, the newspaper which published this, without disclosing that Jock Dunnigan, the man whose picture is shown, was the chief spokesman for the Asbestos Institute. So this is a guy who's selling asbestos and putting this propaganda in the newspapers, similar to what you had 2 weeks ago here in Bogota. Next, please. This is what epidemiologists call an epidemic curve. This is the rate of mesothelioma in Mexico. And you can see that starting around 1995, the deaths per year from mesothelioma start going up very fast. And we don't even know how high this curve is going to go. And this is because this is a country that has been, like Colombia, using asbestos very much since around 1970. And 25, 30 years later, you see the epidemic curve of mesotheliomas in the typical latency of these occupational and environmental cancers. Next, please. There were people who have opposed this. In Puerto Rico, 35 years ago, school teachers were protesting, working in school buildings that were made from asbestos cement, and they put these signs up in the buildings. You will not see any warning labels on the asbestos cement products in your country that communicate this information to the workers who take power saws and drills and demolish these materials every day. Next. In India, the business of asbestos is so profitable and growing that they needed to build a new asbestos factory in the poor state of Bihar in eastern part of India. And the school children found out about the dangers of asbestos and informed the adults. And then there were hundreds of people protesting against the construction of this asbestos factory. At one point in this dispute, the school children said, okay, we will let you build the asbestos factory in our country if you order us to burn our school books first. The next picture, I was there a year later visiting at a conference, and the man standing to my left went to jail for 64 days. I asked him to have the honor of being photographed with him in protesting against the construction of this asbestos factory in Muzaffarpur in the state of Bihar. He succeeded. They did not build that asbestos factory. I have a 5-part formula for the prevention of occupational disease. Information is the first thing. It's the basis of everything else. Information at the level of medical information, information at the level of workers, the general public through the media, and consumers. Second is regulation. Industries that are dangerous have to be subject to government regulation and control. Otherwise, the hazardous industries have an unfair advantage in competing against the safer ones. Third is compensation. If occupational diseases are not prevented by these industries, then the companies that are responsible have an obligation to compensate the people who become disabled, who lose their ability to support themselves financially, or who die from occupational disease. If companies have to incur the costs of regulation and compensation, they will be more inclined to use less hazardous substances. Humiliation is very effective in dealing with some of the liars who come before the public and try and say that asbestos is safe if they can be properly dealt with. And the last thing is putting people in jail for this kind of crime. And the theme of my talk is criminality in the asbestos industry. And I want to talk more about that. Next, please. I want first to say that the profitability of the asbestos industry is based on avoiding the costs of prevention and compensation. So if they don't have to spend the money to prevent the occupational disease, and they don't have to tell the workers, and they don't have to compensate the victims, only then is it a profitable business. And The substitutes that have been used instead of asbestos only cost a little bit more, maybe 5 to 15% more, to use plastic fibers and cellulose fibers instead of asbestos fibers to make fiber cement products, which are equally good. But the asbestos industry understands, because of this narrow profit advantage, that they have to form a corrupt relationship with the governments where they operate. And so they buy media, they buy politicians, they buy government officials, and they develop inappropriate relations with all of the forms of power in society. The asbestos market depends on public ignorance, and so in order to do something about this problem, we need to raise public awareness about the deadliness of asbestos. The cover-ups of the asbestos industry have been going on for over 70 or 80 years, and they've been documented thoroughly. Corporate documents have been produced in lawsuits in the United States, especially from leading companies all the way back to the 1930s. These companies have known that asbestos could kill people, and they covered it up. And so, starting in the 1970s, when there started to be more regulation in North America and Northern Europe, the industry decided they would have to go to the developing world in order to keep making their money. And so you started to see the expansion of asbestos industry in Mexico, in Colombia, in Asia, and the epidemic curve will follow the expansion of the industry, which began really in a big way in the 1970s. Next, please. Now we're up to Mr. Schmidt-Heine. Stefan Schmidt-Heine inherited the Eternit business. At the age of 29, he was the chief executive officer. It was 1976, and he called all of his managers together in Neuss, in Germany, and the documentation of this meeting survives. And Mr. Schmidt-Heine, they reviewed the dangers of asbestos as a crisis that they were going to have to confront in Europe, where they had factories all over Europe. And Mr. Schmidt-Heine told his managers that some of you were shocked to hear about the dangers of asbestos. We have to make sure that doesn't happen with the workers. Next. At one point, one of the judges who was considering this said, well, if Mr. Schmidt-Heine really was involved in covering this up, and it caused the delay of the ban of asbestos in Italy by 10 years and thousands of deaths, then that can be compared to the meetings in Wannsee in 1942, where the Nazis decided on the industrialization of the genocide. And this was put in the newspapers in Italy. Next. These are the lawyers, very well-paid lawyers, who represented Mr. Schmidt-Heine at the trial. I was told that Mr. Schmidt-Heine was spending 10 million euros a year on these gentlemen and on the public relations people that he hired to manage his image during this trial. Another thing that had happened, now Mr. Schmidt-Heine is an interesting guy, because he sold out asbestos plants and was out of the asbestos industry by the very early 1990s. And then he reinvented himself as a green businessman. He started talking about sustainable development and started something called the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. It was one of the business leaders at the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro in 1992. And so by 1996, he had completely changed his image from that of an asbestos magnate to a multi-billionaire green businessman. And he was given an honorary Doctor of Humane Letters by Yale University, one of the most prestigious universities in the United States, in 1996. Also that year, Mr. Schmidt-Heine was able to get his friends in Brazil to arrange for him to get the Order of the Southern Cross from the government of Brazil. This is the highest honor that Brazil can pay to any foreigner. And this was Mr. Schmidt-Heine was changing his image, and he had reason to believe that he would be criminally prosecuted for what had happened in Italy. The factory had been closed in 1986, but Mr. Schmidt-Heine had hired this public relations firm called Bellotti to represent him, and some of the documents that the police seized from the Bellotti people in their offices showed that they had been hired back in 1984 by Schmidt-Heine, by Eternit, for the purpose of protecting the Swiss parent company from any liabilities and for protecting Mr. Schmidt-Heine personally from any responsibility. And they had a detailed plan about how they would keep all of this controversy and compensation at level 1 and level 2, protecting level 3, which was the parent corporation in Switzerland, and level 4, which was Mr. Schmidt-Heine himself. And these documents make it very clear the game that they were playing in order to avoid any liabilities or repercussions in Italy. But in Italy, there were criminal prosecutions of Schmidt-Heine's managers in the 1980s and in the early 1990s, and so I think he realized he needed to rehabilitate his image in order to avoid being criminally prosecuted himself. He didn't succeed. He was criminally prosecuted. The trial finished in 2011. Mr. Schmidt-Heine was sentenced to 16 years in jail by the trial court. In 2012, the appeal court heard the case. They added some additional deaths from Naples and other parts of Italy that hadn't been counted in the original trial, and increased Mr. Schmidt-Heine's jail sentence to 18 years in jail. This judgment came out in June of 2013, and it was in that year that the asbestos victims group in Italy asked me if something could be done about Yale. We started an effort to persuade Yale to withdraw the honorary degree now that Mr. Schmidt-Heine had been convicted and sentenced by 2 courts to long jail sentences. And Yale University absolutely refused to even reconsider whether they had made a mistake, even when we presented them with all the evidence. So you can only wonder about how the big money and power of people like this operates behind the scenes when Yale University was willing even to take some bad publicity in the newspapers and still refuse to reconsider whether they should have given this guy an honorary degree. Next, please. So I want to close by saying that from a public health point of view, asbestos is a lot like tobacco. The World Health Organization was scandalized by the disclosure that the tobacco industry had sent former World Health Organization employees back to lobby the World Health Organization and to distract the World Health Organization from doing anything about tobacco. And when these documents came out in public, it was humiliating for the World Health Organization, and WHO decided they would have to take firm action about how to deal with how to deal with the tobacco industry. And so they said there's a fundamental and irreconcilable conflict between the interests of the tobacco companies and the public health interests. The more they sell, the more people they kill. It's as simple as that. And so what the World Health Organization said was that governments should interact with the tobacco industry only for the purpose of regulating the industry and basically controlling and limiting smoking to the point where, to the fullest extent, people are discouraged from taking up smoking or are able to stop smoking. And the parallel is that for the asbestos industry, the same conflict exists. This is an industry that's building its fortune on a mountain of corpses. And they know it, and the governments should simply not treat them like a legitimate business. The governments should treat them like the tobacco industry and say, all right, we are going to ban asbestos as soon as we can, and we're going to have regulations so that the workers who deal with the buildings and the maintenance and repair of structures and vehicles that still have asbestos in them are going to be properly protected. This is what countries need to do. This is what over 50 countries have done in banning asbestos, and many of those countries have also followed that with development of regulations to try and protect the workers who are going to be exposed to the asbestos that's already out there in society from past years of sale. So I'll leave you with that thought, that you have to do something about this. It's your world. Many of you are students. I'm going to be gone in a few years. I'm 68 years old. But it's your world, and if you want it to be a safer place, you're going to have to make it a safer place. Good luck.